Alright, so for the last part of this Unity C# basic series, we're going to be going over interfaces. And to get straight into it, interfaces are basically contracts for your C# classes. Interfaces make your classes have to meet like certain requirements, and in this case it would be functions that has to be in your class. So to get started, I'm going to create a new C# script. I'm just going to call this interfaces, and I'm going to attach this to my example game object, and we can get coding. So to make an interface, above my class or in any other C# class, you just type in public interface and you put the letter I to indicate that what you're creating is an interface, and you put in the name of what you want it to be. So I can just do I damage. Yeah, I damage. And inside of here you can put in different functions that a certain class will have to have inside of them whenever they're being inherited from this interface. And when I say inherit, I talk about putting certain instances across this colon here. So seeing how mono behavior is to the right after this colon means that this class is inheriting from the mono behavior, which allows us to have access to the start and update function. Let's create two functions: public void, I guess, heal, a void of healing, and a public void of damage. And there you go. Now we have our interface that will let us heal a certain class or damage a certain class, and we can take that and put a comma after your mono behavior and put in your interface class. And now you'll see that we get an error. If you hover over it, it says interfaces does not implement interface member, and this is basically the interface complaining that our class does not meet the requirements, or in other words, we do not have the functions that this interface has within it. So a quick fix for this, if you're using Visual Studio, you can just do Alt-Control and implement the interface, but you may have to type it in manually depending on what you're using. So there, now that we have the two functions that the interface has inside, it is no longer giving us an error because we now meet the contract, or we meet the requirements of the interface. So now I can just above these I could put a public float of health, and I can just do health minus equals 10, and then in heal health plus equals 10, and I can just do that, and there you go. So we have two functions of damage and heal from our interface, and we can do this to any other class that we can create. So if we go back into Unity and we create, I guess, two other classes, I can just call this ogre, and I can call the other class Shrek or something. Yeah, ogre and Shrek. Alright, and let's say these two guys have health. They have health, and we want to be able to damage and heal them. So what we'll do is just make our two classes here, ogre and Shrek, implement the I damage interface that we created, and we just implement the functions damage and heal, and we could basically just copy this code over. So we implement the functions and we implement our health, and same for the ogre, and we implement I damage. And there you go, we have multiple different classes that contain the same interface for damaging and healing. And one cool thing about interfaces when working in Unity is that you can get component with these interfaces. So let's say these two classes are different names, right? And we do not want to do a bunch of try get components on every single class that has health on it. What we can do instead is just do a try get component for this I damage interface. So to do that, I guess I can create two other game objects. Call this ogre. I can attach the ogre class to it, and a Shrek game object, and I can attach the Shrek game object to it. And on the example game object, I can go back to interfaces, just get rid of this as that was only for an example, and re-implement the start function. And now what we can do is, instead of doing find object of type ogre and find object of type Shrek, like this, what we can do is have a reference to a list of our two game objects here. So if I do public game object array and just call these enemies, and we can assign that in the inspector, instead of doing if enemies dot like 0 dot name is equal to ogre, and then having to recursively check, or in other words, check every single game object to see if their name matches their class, and then getting component based off of its name. What we can do instead is just do for each loop over each of the enemies. So I can just do game object enemy in enemies. There you go. And what I can do is just enemy dot get component and put in I damage, and it will return the I damage interface attached to the class of that game object. And from there we can call the damage or heal calls. So I guess I could do heal. There, we call the heal function, and I guess back in the Shrek and Ogre class, we just add time.delta time, so it doesn't look like the numbers are going off the charts. We can actually see how it is increasing over time, and there you go. Now every frame, instead of having to check for the class name and getting component of that class based off of the name, we can just get component of the interface that is attached to the class, and we can therefore access the function that is within the class that is a part of the interface, if that makes sense. Alright, so if we go back into Unity and we go to our example game object and we assign our two enemies here, so Ogre and Shrek, there you go, and we hit play, and if we look at the Ogre, you'll see its health going up over time, the delta time, and same for Shrek. And this is one big use for interfaces. They allow us to create some sort of universal type amongst different classes and class names, so you can keep things organized and easy to work with. And that is all for interfaces and for the series of Unity C# basics. I hope you learned quite a bit from the series. I carefully planned this to put in things that you probably wouldn't see much in a basics thing, and I tried to teach some useful things and maybe some things for optimization and all that, trying to keep this tutorial series high quality. And yeah, if you enjoyed this series, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next series or tutorial. Goodbye.